Y'all, that people be mad. You gonna always be mad. What gotta say? If you ain't got no haters, you ain't popping. So D-Lo, we finna turn up on these. He got me on one, playing on my top, man.
I'm finna give y'all exactly what y'all been looking for. The people who been talking a little crazy, I see y'all. I see the crazy people, okay? I see the crazy people that's rappers. I see the crazy people that's bloggers. I see the crazy people that's fans. I see the crazy people that's naughties. Y'all is finna get exactly what y'all been looking for.
Y'all, this isn't just gossip anymore. This is the kind of story that doesn't just trend, it detonates. Because behind the courtside smiles, the public affection, the perfect couple illusion everyone was buying into, something darker was already unfolding in silence. And according to whispers moving through the industry, Megan Thee Stallion wasn't reacting, she was watching. Calculating. Waiting. Every post. Every appearance. Every move that didn't quite add up. And then, the cracks started to show. Hidden meetings that were never supposed to be seen. Private trips that didn't match the timeline. A sudden shift in energy that no one could explain, but everyone could feel. And right when people thought it was just coincidence, the most dangerous rumor hit the surface. An alleged pregnancy. Not confirmed. Not denied. Just circulating. And if even part of that is true, this isn't just messy, it's catastrophic. Because now we're not talking about a relationship anymore. We're talking about overlapping realities. A public love story, and a private situation colliding at the worst possible moment. And at the center of it all? GloRilla.io Gotti, and a truth that, if fully exposed, could destroy more than just reputations. But here's what makes this even colder. The alleged moment everything shifted wasn't loud. It wasn't public. It was quiet. Controlled. Final. I know everything. No yelling. No chaos. Just a statement that froze the room. And what came after? Silence so heavy it said more than any confession ever could. Y'all, what looked like a picture-perfect moment was already falling apart behind the scenes, and nobody saw it coming. At first, it was simple, clean, easy to believe. GloRilla and Brandon Ingram were being sold as the next power couple. Courtside appearances. Public affection. The kind of energy that makes fans invest emotionally, like they're watching something real unfold in real time. But according to whispers circulating quietly through the industry, it wasn't real. Not completely. Because while the cameras were focused on what looked like loyalty, another narrative was developing in the shadows. And Megan Thee Stallion allegedly saw it before anyone else did. Not because she was told. Because she noticed. Small things at first. Timing that didn't line up. Movements that felt off. Energy shifts that couldn't be explained publicly, but were impossible to ignore privately. And in an industry where perception is everything, those tiny inconsistencies? They're never random. They're signals. And Megan was reading them. Because behind the curated posts and carefully controlled appearances, something else was quietly taking shape, something that didn't match the story being sold to the public. Sources claim there were meetings no one could explain. Private, unannounced, off the grid, trips that didn't align with schedules, moments where certain people were unavailable at the exact same time. Patterns that, individually, meant nothing, but together, they told a completely different story. And right at the center of those patterns was a name that kept coming up. Yo Gotti. At first, it was easy to dismiss. Label boss, artist, business relationship. That's what it looked like on paper. But insiders started questioning the boundaries. Because this didn't feel like business. This felt personal. The kind of attention that goes beyond contracts, beyond music, beyond what's expected in a professional dynamic. And when those lines start to blur, the truth doesn't stay hidden for long. It just waits for the right moment to surface. Then came the shift. Sudden, noticeable, unavoidable. GloRilla's behavior started changing. Publicly, everything still looked controlled, but something underneath it was different. The confidence was still there, but the consistency wasn't. Appearances became more calculated, movements more guarded. And that's when the whispers got louder. Because people weren't just observing anymore. They were connecting. And once people start connecting dots, the narrative begins to crack. Then came the most dangerous part of all. A rumor. Quiet at first, then impossible to ignore. An alleged pregnancy. No confirmation. No denial. Just speculation spreading faster than anyone could contain it. And in an industry built on image, timing is everything. Because if that timeline doesn't match the story being presented publicly, everything collapses. And that's exactly what Megan allegedly realized. This wasn't just about betrayal. This was about overlap. Because if one relationship is being pushed in the spotlight, while another is developing in the shadows at the exact same time, then someone knew more than they were saying. And someone was playing a much deeper game. For Megan, this wasn't industry drama. This was personal. Because according to insiders, she had extended support, opportunity, visibility. She played a role in elevating GloRilla's position, helping her step into rooms that not everyone gets access to. And in return, allegedly, silence, secrets, and a reality that didn't match the loyalty being displayed. That kind of betrayal doesn't explode immediately. It simmers. And Megan didn't react publicly. She didn't post. She didn't respond. She watched, waited, and gathered. Because when you know something the world doesn't yet know, you don't rush. You choose your moment. And according to what insiders are now suggesting, that moment is getting closer. Because once a story like this starts to unravel, there's no controlling it. No rewriting it. No escaping it. There's only one question left now. Who breaks first? The silence didn't last. It never does. Because once a story like this starts circulating behind closed doors, it doesn't stay contained, it mutates. It spreads. And eventually, it reaches the one person it was never supposed to reach. Brandon Ingram. At first, insiders say it wasn't a confrontation. It was a question. A quiet one. The kind you ask when something doesn't feel right, but you're not ready to accept the answer. Because from the outside, everything still looked intact. The appearances hadn't stopped. The energy, at least publicly, hadn't shifted enough to trigger alarm. But behind that surface, pressure was building. And pressure always exposes what's underneath. Sources claim Brandon started noticing the same inconsistencies others had already picked up on. Delayed responses. Missed calls. Moments that didn't add up. Not dramatic enough to accuse, but just enough to doubt. And doubt is where everything begins to unravel. Because once doubt enters, trust doesn't stand a chance. Meanwhile, the whispers weren't slowing down. They were evolving. Because now, it wasn't just about suspicious timing or hidden interactions. Now, the narrative had direction, shape, specificity. And at the center of it all, Gotti. Insiders began claiming that whatever connection existed there wasn't recent. It wasn't random. It was ongoing. Which changes everything. Because if something has been happening consistently behind the scenes, while a completely different relationship is being built in the public eye, that's not confusion. That's construction. And the timeline? That's where it gets uncomfortable. Because once people started laying events side by side, the gifts, the appearances, the sudden behavioral shifts, it stopped looking like coincidence. It started looking intentional. The luxury moments that once felt like generosity now felt like signals. The presence that once seemed supportive now felt persistent. The proximity that once looked harmless now felt calculated. And for Brandon, that realization doesn't hit all at once. It hits in waves. First disbelief, then silence, then clarity. Because imagine replaying every moment in your head, every interaction, every public display, every word, and suddenly realizing it might not have meant what you thought it did. That the version of reality you were standing in wasn't the only one. That there was another version, running parallel the entire time. That's not heartbreak. That's disorientation. And insiders say his reaction wasn't loud. It was cold, measured, final. No public outburst. No social media drama. No attempts to salvage what was already collapsing under the weight of its own contradictions. He stepped back. And when he did, everything shifted. Because the second that distance became visible, even subtly, the narrative changed. Now it wasn't about a couple anymore. It was about a situation. A situation that no one could fully explain, but everyone was trying to understand. And right in the middle of that shift, Megan the Stallion remained exactly where she had been from the start. Silent, but no longer invisible. Because while everyone else was reacting in real time, insiders suggest she had already processed the situation long before it reached this point. She wasn't catching up to the story. She was ahead of it. Allegedly holding pieces of information that connected everything, the kind of information that doesn't just clarify a narrative. It defines it. And this is where the tone of the entire situation darkens. Because it's one thing for rumors to circulate. It's another for someone to have receipts. Not speculation. Not theory. Something tangible. Something that, if revealed, wouldn't just confirm suspicions. It would end debates. And according to sources, that possibility is exactly what's keeping everyone on edge. Because the moment those receipts surface, there's no controlling the fallout. No spin. No recovery. Just impact. And right now, everyone is waiting. Not for confirmation, but for exposure. Because the story isn't building anymore. It's positioning. And when everything is in position, it doesn't leak. It detonates. And then, the story stopped being controlled. Because up until this point, everything was still operating in fragments, whispers, patterns, quiet realizations happening behind closed doors. Nothing fully confirmed. Nothing officially acknowledged. But that's the illusion. Because in situations like this, the truth doesn't arrive all at once. It leaks, piece by piece. And according to insiders, that leak had already begun. Not publicly, not yet, but internally, the damage was already spreading. Because the closer people got to the timeline, the harder it became to ignore what it was pointing toward. Overlaps. Moments that shouldn't have intersected, but did. Dates that didn't align with the story being presented, but matched something else entirely. And right at the center of those overlaps, GloRilla. A name that, until recently, was attached to growth, success, momentum. Now, attached to questions. Heavy ones. Because the narrative had shifted from what's happening to something far more uncomfortable. How long has this been happening? And once that question enters the conversation, everything before it gets re-examined. Every appearance, every caption, every moment that once felt genuine, now viewed through a completely different lens. And the deeper people looked, the clearer it became that this wasn't just messy. It was layered. Because while one story was being performed publicly, another was unfolding privately. And those two realities? They were never supposed to collide. But they did. And when they did, they didn't just expose tension. They exposed intent. Because if timelines overlap long enough, it stops being coincidence. It becomes design. And that's where this situation takes its darkest turn. Because insiders aren't just suggesting that something happened. They're suggesting that it was managed. That while one relationship was being elevated, highlighted, promoted, made visible, another was being maintained in silence. Carefully. Strategically. Until something disrupted the balance. And that disruption wasn't loud. It was quiet. A shift in awareness. A realization that reached the wrong person at the wrong time. And once that happened, there was no containing it. Because back at the center of it all, Gotti, the role he allegedly played was no longer background. It was central. Not just as a name connected to speculation, but as a constant presence within the timeline itself. The gifts. The proximity. The energy that never quite aligned with his standard professional dynamic. All of it now being reinterpreted. Not as support, but as involvement. And involvement changes everything. Because if that connection is as deep as insiders are claiming, then the consequences don't just affect one person. They ripple. Across reputations. Across relationships. Across the entire structure that was holding this narrative together. And this is where the pressure becomes unbearable. Because silence, at this stage, isn't protection anymore. It's confirmation in the eyes of the public. Every moment without a statement. Every post that avoids the subject. Every appearance that doesn't address what everyone is already thinking. It all adds weight. And that weight? It's building. Because right now, no one is controlling the narrative anymore. Not GloRilla. Not Gotti. Not even Megan Thee Stallion. Because once a story reaches this level, it belongs to the audience. And the audience is watching everything. Analyzing. Comparing. Waiting for one break in the silence. One confirmation. One mistake. Because that's all it takes. And when that moment comes, this doesn't stay a rumor. It becomes a record. Permanent. Unavoidable. And impossible to take back. So now, everything hangs in suspension. 3 names. 1 timeline. And a truth that's no longer hidden. Just not fully spoken yet. And when it is, it won't just answer questions. It will end illusions. Completely. And now, it's all on the edge. Because what we're watching isn't just drama anymore. It's the final seconds before impact. The silence has stretched too far, the tension is too thick, and the story has grown too big to stay buried. Every move, every absence, every carefully avoided question is feeding something much darker, something that's already spiraling beyond control. Sources aren't asking if something happened anymore, they're asking who's going to crack first. Because if even a fraction of these allegations are true, then what we're looking at isn't just a messy situation, it's a complete collapse of trust, image, and power. A public love story that may have been built on a private reality no one was supposed to see. A timeline that doesn't just confuse, it exposes. And a silence that no longer protects anyone, it implicates them. And the most dangerous part? The longer this drags out, the worse it gets. Because the internet doesn't forget. It doesn't forgive. It waits. It watches. And when it finally gets confirmation, real confirmation, it doesn't just react, it explodes. Careers can shift overnight. Reputations can shatter in seconds. And once that line is crossed, there's no undoing it, no rewriting it, no escaping it. So now the question isn't what happened. It's who's ready to face what's coming. Because when the truth finally surfaces, and it will, this won't just be another headline. This will be a detonation that echoes across the entire industry. And when it hits, nobody involved walks away the same.